Hey, this is Writers Row. I'm DC Wright-Hammer, and I have a very special guest on this episode. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm LT Ward. I'm a short story writer aiming to become a novelist.
And I brought LT on this episode to talk about something I hear a lot in the writing community, and I've struggled with myself as a writer. How much reading should we be doing? I was reading, I think, an interview with Stephen King, and he's like, writers should be writing 4 to 6 hours a day, and the rest of the time reading. Like, okay, that doesn't necessarily sound realistic if you have a full-time job or anything like that. So I know that you have thoughts on this. You yourself are a pretty voracious reader. So why don't I just ask the open-ended question, LT? How much should writers read?
You're going to hate the answer because it depends on who you are.
Okay.
So, so every writer should read, but how you read and how it affects your writing is going to differ. I have actually asked this question of other authors all over the place, and like many will read and they can't write because the other author's words and characters fill their heads. Um, Others are like, well, I can read in the evening and I can write in the morning and all that. Me, I have 4 books going at any given point while I'm writing for, but they're never the genre I'm writing.
Okay.
So like if I'm writing middle grade, I cannot read anything middle grade. If I'm writing literary fiction, I cannot read literary fiction. And I love that you should read a bunch. And I had, I hated that Stephen King thing. I hated it because everybody hears it and it's like, who has the time? So, and I have 4 kids. One is no longer living with me. She's off to college. So good for her.
Right.
But I'm still responsible for 3 other little humans, making sure they stay alive on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
I have a full-time job with a commute. And I actually have a life that sometimes is not writing. And so, like, and you have to sleep, you have to eat, all that. And it's like, so you can't do that many hours. I do have the advantage. I'm a librarian. So my job comes with daily desk time. And so when patrons aren't there, we're encouraged to read. So I usually get 2 hours of reading in every day
Wow.
built into my job.
Mm-hmm.
That is not what I would expect someone else to do.
Yeah, and I don't, I'm not trying to throw Stephen King under the bus. I think, you could take any quote from any author out of context,
Absolutely.
and so that the point is just showing the extreme that I've heard, and people kind of will socialize this idea that when you're not writing, you should be reading, and vice versa. And honestly, when I first wrote my first 2 novels, I was not an avid reader. I was not even just a fun reader. I probably read maybe 10 novels in my whole life before I wrote my first 2 novels. I was a little different. I was pretty good at writing in high school and in college. That's how I kind of faked it until I made it. Like I could get by in classes because I could write a good paper, not because I necessarily knew what I was talking about. Like you have to know a little bit, but I could write a good paper. And that translated into a lot of the jobs that I had where I had to do quite a bit of writing and description and different things like that. I just started writing books and I wasn't reading while writing them. I wasn't reading before. I just started writing them. And the weirdest thing happened when I got done writing. I wrote my first book and then went headlong into my second book. About halfway through my second book, I'm like, you know what? I will start doing some reading. And I read like 22 novels in like 6 months, like super fast, rapid fire, because I had, with all that writing and editing and revising, I had actually built the skill of reading that I'd never had before. And it was just having to reread and reread the same thing. And I had reading comprehension that I really never had in my life. And so I did it in reverse. I learned to read by writing rather than learning to write by reading.
Yeah. It's weird. Like I went for 6 months where I couldn't read. Severe, actually, I had a hypomanic episode, and because I'm bipolar 2 and I had a hypomanic episode, and for 6 months I couldn't read. And I was like, I'm a writer and I can't read. I would read the same paragraph over and over again, no comprehension. And I wasn't reading much before then. I was kind of like having a book here and there. And I discovered incremental reading is actually really good for me. I would just read one short story today, just push myself through, get through it, and then go on. And then I started doing it with chapters.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started getting that back. And then I was able to start doing some writing. And I'm like, but I can't read while I write of the same stuff. I'm like these books that were inspiring me. I can't do this. What do I do? Graphic novels. The artwork actually changes how my brain processes it. So I can read graphic novels. Highly recommend Lock and Key, by the way. That was like,
okay.
I was like, this is horror in a different way. But it was opening up, reading different genres and styles and all that. But it is, as like you said, as you're reading, you're kind of like, okay, so I'm breaking it down. Am I seeing a theme? Am I doing? And it's still fun for me. If it's not fun for you, then don't do it. I am amazed at how people are like, well, they feel they have to justify what they're reading, what they like. Read it.
Yeah.
I don't care. Now, and this being said, so like on Instagram, I have my bio is in a vie with Bukowski. I hate Bukowski. Charles Bukowski is the one corpse. If I could dig up and beat I would hit him. I'd punch him if I could beat up Charles Bukowski. Really dislike this. I've read his work. I do not like him. That being said, I hate that I enjoy his prose.
Okay.
And but I understand it's problematic stuff. And as long as you understand what the issues are, read what you want. Understand, like I understand what the problematic issues are. So even though I can enjoy certain things, it's fine because it's not complicating it. But I've noticed, like, I have a lot of friends who have talked about, oh gosh, I like reading these young adult books. Awesome.
Right.
You're reading. I don't care because you're at what it is. I love that you're reading. And the thing is, writers, for when they're reading, they have to find something they actually really enjoy or it really hurts them. I mean, it's like, it's worse than like other readers because writers want this experience. And it's like, so you've got to keep searching for what is that book? What is that story that's going to just make you go, oh my gosh, I just got to keep reading. I have to keep going.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. So the one of the authors I have a love-hate relationship is Cormac McCarthy. I read The Road and it blew my mind. I was weeping, big old tears at the end of that book. I could reread it and love it. It's just, for what it is, it's perfect. It's amazing. Like, I can't believe he did that. I tried to read Blood Meridian, which is the Western, and his portrayal of Native, indigenous Americans and, other, groups. I get it was periodically accurate. I couldn't handle it. Plus, the way he wrote it, he tries to write it in a way that's, again, somewhat period accurate. And it just, it made me hate reading for a good 6 months to a year. I just put it down halfway through. And people talk about how great it is and they love it for what it is. That's fine. And I think that's the other side of it too, is you'll see historically great books, or you'll see the New York Times bestsellers, or you'll see Stephen King produced another book. I pick on Stephen King a lot. I've read his stuff, and I like the books I like that he wrote are I haven't read any of his horror. I've read 5 of his novels, and none of them are strictly horror. And so
okay, but Misery was just fun because, like you said, the writer's thing, his hatred towards a typewriter, and you're going, I know this hatred towards my laptop. It's so
I got to get to that one. I saw the movie, obviously.
Yeah.
Complete side note, the directors of that, because in the book, they don't use a sledgehammer on his feet. They just saw them, and the director was like, "We can't saw off his feet. Like, no one will ever want to
Right.
watch this movie. That's the only thing they'll remember it for." And then they did the sledgehammer, and that's the only thing they remember
Yes.
from that movie
Yep.
is Kathy Bates taking a sledgehammer to his ankle. That was
Yep.
like worse.
Yep.
Maybe, I don't know. Anyway, but the relationship with reading, I think, one of the things that if you have this meta experience with reading and you've got this pressure, or you're feeling like you have to do it, or you've got to meet some quota, or if you're not doing it, that's one of the reasons why I kind of want to talk to you, because I know you read a lot. And so how do we manage that? We want to read because it's helpful to our craft, but we don't want to make it this obligation.
Yeah, so it really is finding, so I'm bringing up the bipolar thing. One of the things I've learned to manage my bipolar state is it's a mood disorder. I get very affected in my emotions. So I have this weird experience that when I acquire books, I check them out from the library, or I buy books. I have them lined up on stacks all throughout my house. And when I go to pick what my next one is, I actually remember what made me check it out or buy that book.
Okay.
And so I don't pick a book based off of a blurb. I pick it off of what caused me to acquire that book. And it could be word of mouth. It could be someone said it's good for your work on that. So whatever I feel in the mood for at that moment, what I'm seeking is what I need. And sometimes it's a craft book. Sometimes it's just fun. And there are times where it's a deadline thing of, hey, I need you to read my manuscript, and I agreed to beta read or something. Absolutely. I respect deadlines.
Sure.
That kind of thing. But especially when you're pushing yourself, if you know, like, okay, I need to read more of this genre, and this book is 350 pages, it's going to take me this long, and I'm not enjoying it, you have to follow that book with something you've wanted to read. Something
right.
Fun reading for writers is the job. And there is reading stuff that you may not necessarily care for, but it's like, it's pop culture, or it's for the genre, or it's written recently, and it's a reference you yourself should know. And it's not, well, everybody loves it. It's so you know, and you get that firsthand experience. But it is hard. It's really hard when you just don't want it, and you're going, oh my gosh, this is like making me floss my teeth before the dentist. I don't want to do it.
So my work in progress right now is a fantasy novel that I'm writing. And so what inspired me to write it is the fact that A Song of Ice and Fire is not done, the books. I finally read all the 5 that have been released. I haven't read all the supplemental work yet, but I just got inspired to write fantasy and started writing. And I read a whole bunch of different things in between while writing fantasy, but I made a pledge to myself this year that I would gear sort of all of my media intake, or not all of it, but my focused media intake would be fantasy. And so I'm reading The Wheel of Time, the first book there.
Yeah.
It's a good book. It's a slog. There's, with this epic fantasy, you're getting a lot of traveling. You're getting a lot of, in a movie, this would be an establishing shot that would show them walking. If it was like Lord of the Rings, it would show them walking for 45 seconds, and you get the idea that they covered a lot of ground. Well, in this, they're describing, scenery, things like that. And that's a part of the fantasy genre. And I'm kind of keeping that in mind while I'm writing mine. Mine's a little more character driven, plot driven, and not as much world building. There's obvious world building, but it's just, a little more focused. But then I'm playing Skyrim, the game, because I didn't really play that when it came out. I played it a little bit, but that's this fantasy game, and just getting that in my head. I'm watching The Witcher on Netflix, and so getting all this magic and fantasy, and that's sort of how I'm supplementing my writing. And the book isn't doing it. I'm struggling through this reading of the book. I'm not, where to the point where you don't even think about it. It's like I used to I'll read 45 minutes to an hour a day, or something like a half hour a day. And the time I would normally read, I fill it, And then it's not until afterwards that I forgot, oh, I didn't read it. And that tells me that I'm not interested in reading right now, or I'm not interested in reading this book. And in the past, I'd feel guilty about that because I need to read, because I want to finish this book, because I'm obligated. And what I've learned recently is you'll finish the book if you want to, you don't if you don't. Like, I think as writers, we get obsessed with closure. We get obsessed with, is it a good ending or a bad ending? But at least it's an ending. And life in general doesn't tie things up in a bow like that. Almost never.
But see, like, I have that anxiety. I have to finish the book. I start it, I will finish it. I've not finished in the last 3 years. There's one book I haven't finished. Otherwise, they kind of linger, and I do eventually get them done. And the one I didn't finish was so problematic, it never should have been published. It was just, it's that awful. It's just so bad.
Sure.
And
okay,
but like, you know, you're talking about going in and just doing all this fantasy, and I'm the other way. I am all over the place. So like, I'm reading Joe Hill right now because I love horror, and I think this is the funniest part, that I was always afraid of horror as a kid, and I was like, and then I started looking, like, I jumped, I startled at everything. Everything scared me. And then I realized I read like every Dean Koontz book in high school, and yet I never thought maybe I liked horror.
Right.
Like, okay, cool. Anyway, so I'm reading Joe Hill, which I recently discovered I'm enjoying his style. And so the next book I'm reading after this is by L.J. Shen, and she writes toxic erotica, you know, super alpha male, terrible. Oh God, people should not be doing this. This is graphic, dirty, fun stuff. But, and so what is my current project? I'm writing a middle grade horror story. So why would these work? And it works because it's this weird thing. When I read like romance or other genres, horror actually does better if you write things with romantic style, but on the horror creature. Like, if the monster came up and hissed behind you, it's not as scary as the monster came up and purred into your ear. When you start romanticizing or infantilize, oh great, there's a word I can read but can't say.
Sure.
Okay. But if you actually start mixing the genres, writing has more fun. Like, you just go, ooh, that's a fun line, and that's where I wind up really reading other stuff. And then I have kids at home. I'm reading Phantom Tollbooth to my 7-year-old, and you know, and so I've got another book going because of course I'm reading that with him. But that lends its own style, and it's like, you know, and I've had people go, well, how on earth do you keep these books straight? You can watch more than one TV show in a day.
Right.
And not everybody can do that with the genres, with moving the books around. This is just how my brain works. It kind of goes, oh, it's something scary, so I can go do this. As long as I can do a novel, a graphic novel, a kid's book, a poetry book, and a short story anthology. That's usually the group I've got going. On any given day, I'm in the middle of those. But I do think we need to be reading more. And if, when we're writing, we aren't reading, that's absolutely okay. But know that you should set down the laptop, set down the pen, and at least read a book or two in between projects. You do need it for not only seeing what else is out there, but seeing what you like. If you don't experience something beyond what you're already got going in your head, you can't get inspired off your own stuff. You have to have something else.
Yeah, I would. I guess not. I mean, I guess there's a little bit of a disagreement there. I think, I don't think there's any question that consuming other authors' work is going to give you more perspective, more tools in your toolbox. I think that's true. The one thing I kind of want to tell is figure out what reading means to you. I think that's something that I just want to tell people, because it was all messed up when I was growing up, and it wasn't until I decided that I wanted to be a reader that I put in the work and I was looking forward to it. And then I didn't feel like doing it for 6 months to a year and I just stopped. And then I felt like doing it again for the last year and a half and I just have. And that doesn't mean you're not a reader or are a reader. It doesn't define you as a writer or all that. It will help you with your craft. I
Mhm.
don't think there's any question. But whether you're reading a paperback, an ebook, if you're listening to an audio book or
Mhm.
something like that, where you can consume you know, not a screenplay, you know, because that's what we're when we watch TV shows and we're watching movies,
Mhm.
you're not getting what's inside the character's head unless there's a monologue, which is, you know, its own thing. You don't really get some of that in between stuff. I do find a lot of folks are writing things where there's a lot of dialogue and a lot of action, and the downtime, the parts in between, they don't really build the world very much. They don't really. It's probably clear in their mind, but I think what reading other books or listening to books or whatever you need to do to consume other authors' work, that reminds you that we are world builders at our core. Even if it takes place in modern day, we have to let the reader know that it's modern day with certain cues and things like that.
Mhm.
And it's just, there's nothing against writing screenplays. That's its own thing. But if you're writing even short stories or long form fiction or whatever it is, you got to have that ability to glue together action, dialogue, and whatever else that's going on.
Yeah, but it's like the thing is, the more you read, the more you digest of other versions, you start picking up on things like, I love theme, I love symbolism. Oh my
Right.
God,
Yep.
that's my nectar. Just give it to me. I'm all happy. It's
Yep.
ridiculous. Like when I notice, I'm like, oh, it's back. I love it. Thank you so much. It's so fantastic. I love. But the thing is, the way stories get built, they don't necessarily get the layering you need. And I love like when there's legitimate throwbacks. But like you said, sometimes you need to have a way to have it has to connect it. And a lot of times when we're writing, we have it so vivid
Oh yeah.
that you did not articulate it with words on the page.
Yep.
And hopefully your beta readers, your editors, whoever is assisting you before your work goes out to readers, hopefully they will go, by the way, I didn't understand what happened here.
Right.
And I have found it is with reading other stuff that happens. And it was, so I've had 4 kids, and um, for about good 12 years while I was having them, I think I read 8 books.
Hmm.
It was not much. The last 2 years, I read 160 books.
Wow.
And we're at the end of February, and I've read 12 this year. It's just, it is not. And I spent of that 2 years, I spent 6 months where I couldn't read. So
Mhm.
it is not, it's not something you have to do constantly. It's just when it hits, go for it. And I really think should is one of the worst words. I hate should. You should read this. You should read that. Do you want to? Do you feel you need to? Is this something for you? Like the
Yeah.
only should is if you're telling yourself, I want to do this, so I should do this. But it's like feeling, well, someone's going to think less of me that I haven't read this, that I haven't done this. No, just, you've got to find what works for you. And it's just like anything else. Reading is like anything else with writing. Some of us are pantsers or plotter. I'm a nightmare plantser. I have to do the combo of making an outline
Hmm.
after I've written some impromptu stuff, and then I have to impromptu in between, and I have to keep going back and forth, and it drives
Yep.
people crazy. I actually half write my stuff on legal pads and half type it up. I'm absolute, and then of course I eventually merge it all on the computer.
Sure.
But this style would not work for a lot of writers. And so it's the same thing with reading. You need to read so you know what's going on. You know what? A lot of people, if you go traditional, they go for that. They're like, well, we need to know what it's comparable to in the last 5 years. Please stop using stories from, if you use Romeo and Juliet as your comp, you're kind of out of date. Yes, I get
Yeah.
that. But, and the thing is, I thought it was like maybe just a marketing thing. And then I was attending some of these um, I go to this indie bookstore and I love them, and they really push what has been released.
Mhm.
And I get so annoying after reading these books because they're so good. They're just like such a different kind of story. And
Yep.
it's like, I've been waiting for this one. Where was it? Like, the most annoying I'm about is Saman Chainani's Beasts and Beauty. He rewrote fairy tales. And I'm like, I've read so many fairy tale retellings. There's some great ones out there. This thing made me cry.
Mhm.
I was hugging the book at points. I'm like, this is so good. I lent it to a coworker. She read it in a day and a half and was like, I can't believe it was that good. I lent it to another coworker, and these are librarians going, this book is amazing. And it was published in 2020, because what he did was he basically he just rewrote them in a way to write dark fairy tales without them being problematic.
Oh, okay.
And so it's like, this is the fairy tale where instead of it's the prince comes and saves the girl gets together with her best friend and they go slay the dragon kind of thing. Like, it's just, but it's much richer. And
Right.
it's but it still held that darkness. And I was like, I never thought this kind of thing could exist. And seeing how someone executed it, I am not aiming to write like Saman Chainani. I am inspired though to
Right.
push my own writing, and I'm also inspired to push this book on other people because I really loved it.
There you go.
But yeah, no, it's, we do need to try different things. We have to sample it. You don't know until you try it yourself. And the thing is with reading, it's your firsthand experience with that. So, it matters. You have to try it and you have to do it. It's your vitamin. Sorry.
There you go.
You can make it taste
That's
good.
it. Don't forget to drink water. Don't forget to read
Yeah.
books.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it, LT, for coming on. Any parting words before we wrap it up?
As always, go renew your public library card, please, and return those overdue books.
Awesome. Thanks again, LT. We'll catch you next time. Take care.